نظام غذائي صحي متكامل مرتبط بان انت تشرب ميه كتير. ودايما نسمع من دكاتره التغذيه اشرب ميه كتير، بس للاسف في ناس فاكرين ان انت تشرب ميه كتير ده مرتبط في ان انت هتخس اكتر. لا، ان الميه ليها فوائد واسباب اكتر، عشان كده احنا كدكاتره تغذيه بنقول لك اشرب ميه كتير. اول حاجه تعرف ان مكونات دمك حوالي 95% منها ميه، تعرف ان ترطيب انسجه العين معتمد على وجود ميه، تعرف ان تكوين المخاط اساسا ميه، تعرف ان دلوقتي اذابه المعادن والفيتامينات معتمد في جسمك معتمد على وجود الميه عشان تسهل استخدامها، تعرف كمان ان ليونة المفاصل معتمدة على وجود مية. ازاي؟ لان السائل اللي موجود ما بين المفاصل وبعضها عبارة عن مية. الناس الكبيرة لما بيكون عندها خشونة دايما بنقول لهم اشربوا مية عشان موضوع ليونة المفاصل دوت. تعرف ان المية برضو بتحافظ على درجة حرارة جسمك وبتقلل الضغط على الكلية في ان هي بتطرد السموم من الدم. واخيرا وليس اخرا، اننا لازم نشرب مية كتير، وبالذات وخصوصا في فصل الشتاء. ليه؟ لان انت دلوقتي لما بتقل شرب الميه الدم بتاعك بيبقى لزج، فمعنى كده ان انت ممكن تتعرض لجلطات. فلازم اقل حاجه المينيموم بتاعك في ان انت تستخدم ميه او تشرب ميه هو من 6 ل 8 كوبايات في اليوم. ويا رب تكونوا استفدتوا، واشوفكم في فيديو جديد، وباي باي. تكونوا كويسين وبخير. معاكم دكتوره هبه مجدي، اخصائيه التغذيه العلاجيه. النهارده هنتكلم عن الميزوثيرابي. ايه هو الميزوثيرابي؟ الميزوثيرابي هو بديل لعمليات شفط الدهون. بديل لعمليات شفط الدهون، بديل لعمليات شفط الدهون. بيستخدم لإزالة الدهون الموضعيه المتراكمه في الجسم اللي الدايت اصلا ما بيقدرش ينزلها او ان هو يدوبها. وبيستخدم كمان في علاج السلوليت والاسترتش مارك وشد الترهلات. طب يا دكتور هو بيتحقن فين بالظبط؟ بيتحقن بنحقن الميزوثيرابي في منطقه البطن وفي منطقه الفخذين وكمان في منطقه الدراعات هنا في الانر ارم. ساعات بيبقى فيه هنا الجلد مترهل فبنحقن فيه الميزوثيرابي. طب يا دكتور هو سيف وملوش اي اثار جانبيه؟ طبعا ملوش اي اثار جانبيه، لان احنا بنحقن بحقنه الانسولين اللي هي سنها صغير جدا وما بنحقنش غير الطبقه الخارجيه للجلد. طب يا دكتور دلوقتي هو بنحدد عدد الجلسات على اي اساس؟ طب والنتيجه بتاعته بتظهر في قد ايه؟ وهل هو فعال ولا مش فعال؟ طبعا هو فعال، والجلسات بتاعته بتتحدد على حسب المنطقه المتراكمه فيها الدهون وعلى حسب طبيعه الجسم اللي قدامي. طبعا هو الجلسات بتبقى جلسه كل اسبوع او كل 10 ايام، وبتنزل في المقاسات او بيتحدد ان انت بتنزل من 3 ل 7 سم خلال شهر. وكده اتكلمنا عن الميزوثيرابي. يا رب اكون فدتكم، واستنوني في معلومه جديده ان شاء الله في الفيديو الجاي. باي باي. ازيكم عاملين ايه؟ اخباركم ايه؟ يا رب تكونوا كويسين ودايما متابعينا. النهارده انا هتكلم عن الديتوكس. الديتوكس دوت هو عباره عن نظام بنمشي عليه اول 3 ايام مشروبات وفاكهه وخضار. المشروبات ديت بتبقى يا اما عصاير فريش، عصاير فاكهه فريش، يا اما عصاير خضار. يعني ممكن تجيبي خضار كده وتضربيه في بعضه، بيبقى عصير حلو جدا. اي نوع بقى على حسب ان انت ممكن. هبقى انزل فيديو ازاي نعمل عصاير الديتوكس ان شاء الله قريب. طبعا الديتوكس دي كلمه جايه يعني جاي من كلمه ديتوكسيفيكيشن، يعني ان انا جسمي يتخلص من السموم والفضلات اللي اتعرض ليها الفتره اللي فاتت، بالذات بعد رمضان والعيد. طبعا احنا في رمضان الناس كلها يا اما زايده يا اما وزنها زايد يا اما ثابتين. فرمضان جايين يقولوا لي يا دكتور احنا ثابتين، يا دكتور احنا زايدين. طبعا طبيعي لو انت بتاكل حلويات وملبخ هتبقى ثابت، وممكن تبقى كمان زايد. وفي العيد طبعا كحك العيد والبتيفور والغريبه. فاحسن حاجه نعملها الديتوكس ده. طبعا بيتعمل مره كل 6 شهور، انا مش همشيه عليه طول حياته، يعني هي مره كل 6 شهور عشان نخلص من الجريمه اللي احنا عملناها في نفسنا في رمضان والعيد. فطبعا انا هنزل فيديو قريب عن عصاير الديتوكس وازاي نعملها. وطبعا زي ما انا باكد هو مره كل 6 شهور، وان شاء الله ان شاء الله الناس كلها اللي قلقانه من زياده وزنها بعد رمضان وبعد العيد، صدقوني هتلاقوا نتيجه حلوه جدا، وان شاء الله تكونوا هتخسوا بعد الاسبوع اللي هو 3 ايام ديتوكس، وبعدين نكمل بدايت محسوب سعراته او ايا كان نوع الدايت، طبعا على حسب الحاله الصحيه اللي بتجيلي. ويا رب تكونوا دايما متابعينا، ومبسوطه قوي 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 بان انا بصور لكم الفيديو دوت، ويا رب اكون فدت ناس كتير، وميرسي جدا ليكم، وباي باي. مساء الخير، معاكم دكتوره هبه مجدي، اخصائيه تغذيه علاجيه. دلوقتي انا في سؤال بتسال عليه كتير جدا جدا ومأزم الناس نفسيا جدا جدا جدا. يا دكتور انا طلعت على الميزان ووزني ثابت، ومع ان شكلي ومقاساتي متغيره، طيب ازاي ده يا دكتور؟ يعني اقول لهم يا جماعه عادي جدا، انا الميزان بالنسبه لي مش مقياس، انا المقياس بالنسبه لي المقاسات، لبسك ومقاسات المازوره بتاعتك قدامي وشكلك. حاسس بشكلك متغير، تمام جدا، بس هو ده بسبب حاجه من الاتنين، يا اما انت بتيجي تطلع على الان بودي بتلاقي دهونك نازله والميه زايده والعضلات بتاعتك ثابته، يا اما بتلاقي دهونك نازله والميه كمان نازله بس العضلات اللي زادت. في كلا الحالتين دي حاجه كويسه جدا جدا جدا، مفيش فيها اي مشكله. الدايت بتاعك كويس طالما نزلت في المقاسات ونزلت وفي مقاسات المازوره ولبسك وشكلك اتغير، ده بالنسبه لي حاجه كويسه جدا. وهقول لك جو اهيد في الدايت، ومش هنعمل الميزان مقياس لينا، وهنخلي مقياس لينا المقاسات اللي انا بقيسها عليك او على حضرتك، وما تخلوش الموضوع ياثر عليكم نفسيا، وان شاء الله مع الوقت هتوصلوا لنتيجه حلوه جدا. وتابعونا على صفحتنا على السوشيال ميديا، وشكرا جدا لمتابعتكم. مساء الخير، ازيكم عاملين ايه؟ يا رب تكونوا بخير. معاكم دكتوره هبه مجدي، اخصائيه تغذيه علاجيه. النهارده هتكلم عن اكتر حاجه انا بحبها جدا جدا جدا، هي الصيام المتقطع. حتى انا بحبه ده عن تجربه شخصيه كمان. يعني اي حد بيبقى عايز يمشي على دايت ريستريكتد كالوري بديله ان هو يمشي مع الدايت ده مع الصيام المتقطع، لان هو بيحسن الانسولين ريزيستنس عند ناس كتير جدا عندهم مقاومه انسولين، وبيظبط الجسم من حيث ان هو بينسف الدهون نسف، وكمان بيتخلص الجسم من المواد الضاره اللي بتبقى متكونه بسبب اكل سكريات، دهون، كل ده هو بيخلصنا منه. طبعا في دراسات اثبتت ان في كذا نوع للانترميتنت فاستنج. اول نوع هنتكلم فيه اللي هو الكومبليت الترنت داي فاستنج، ده بيبقى صيام يوم كامل، واليوم اللي بعده ناكل اللي احنا عاوزينه، بالنسبه للناس اللي عايزه تثبت، وبالنسبه للناس اللي عايزه تخس طبعا بياكلوا على حسب الدايت اللي موصوف لهم او اللي مكتوب لهم. تاني نوع الموديفايد الترنت داي فاستنج، النوع دوت هو عباره عن ايه؟ ان انت بتفطر 5 ايام وبتصوم يومين، زي صيام يوم الاثنين والخميس كده. دوت طبعا بتفطر ال5 ايام مش زي ما انت عاوز، طبعا مع دايت اللي محسوب لك واللي موصوف لك تمشي عليه. ممكن نيجي بقى على يوم الاثنين والخميس او اليومين ايا كان اليومين اللي انت هتصومهم، ان احنا نعمل ريستريكتد كالوري، فيري لو كالوري، نعمل دايت في اليومين دول بيبقوا سعراتهم قليله جدا جدا جدا، هنلاقي نتيجه واضحه جدا جدا معاك. اخر نوع بقى اللي هو التايم ريستريكتد فاستنج، ده بيعتمد على الوقت، وبيعتمد على وقت الاكل ووقت كمان الصيام. يعني بنصوم 16 ساعه وبناكل في 8 ساعات. طبعا ولو مشيت على الدايت معين او الدايت برضو طبعا تاني اللي موصوف لك، طبعا هتلاقي نتيجه، انا بوعدكم ان هي بتبقى نتيجه مبهره جدا. الصيام المتقطع حلو جدا ومع اي دايت، وكمان مع الناس اللي عايزه تثبت. فطبعا يا ريت يكون تمشوا عليه، ويا رب ان شاء الله يجيب نتيجه معاكم كلكم، ونتيجه مع الناس اللي مش عارفه تخس. واشوفكم ان شاء الله في فيديوهات تانية، وميرسي جدا جدا ليكم وعلى متابعتكم، ومع السلامه.
Last year I had developed a bad habit of snacking. I had lost all self-control in the face of a free donut or plate of cookies, and I made justifications for my actions. Excuses like, well, I did go to the gym today. Overall, I eat pretty healthy. It's not like I do this every day, until I started to do it every day. I knew something had to change when, even though I exercise often, I noticed I was developing early onset dad gut. So I decided to quit sugar for 30 days. Now, most of us know that too much sugar is a bad thing. It's something that we've been taught ever since we were kids. And apart from simply putting a little bit of weight on your gut, there's a lot more serious problems that can come with eating too much sugar. It can damage your metabolism, cause type 2 diabetes, increase the likelihood that you'll get liver or kidney damage, causes inflammation of the skin, joint pain, tooth decay, and even problems maintaining an erection. So yeah, there's even that as well. So that's probably the main reason. No, it's not the main reason. Get that out of your head. So on top of all that, on top of all of these bad things that it does to your body, it's also very addictive. So I know the first thing that I want to do right now is go through my entire apartment and find all of the things that have added sugar and get them out of my apartment. So let's do that now. I knew I was consuming a decent amount of sugar, but without reading the labels and digging into weekly snacks and meals, I wouldn't know for sure. There were, of course, some no-brainers. Ice cream is loaded. Chocolate snacks are packed. My once-a-month energy drink. But I was also surprised to find a lot of sugar in my protein bars. My breakfast cereal is basically a dessert. Even the bread I was buying had 5 grams a slice. If you're like me and you have very little self-control, the only thing you can do to regain control is to completely change your environment. It's impossible to eat snacks that you refuse to purchase and bring into your home in the first place. So all this stuff needs to go. The cravings were the worst for the first couple days, but even a week in, I was struggling late at night. All right, so I'm 7 days into this no sugar challenge, and this is probably the toughest night so far. About 45 minutes ago, I had a bit of a sugar craving. And instinctively, I went to my snack cabinet, and I'll show you guys what I found. That's it. Organic rice cake. Nothing sweet there. Before I started this challenge, I did a little bit of research, but I still had a lot of questions about sugar. What kind of sugar should we be avoiding, and how much is too much? So I asked my friend Becca Schern to help clear some things up for me. She's a registered dietitian and founder of Minimal Wellness. I'm hoping you can help me kind of break down when people decide to get sugar out of the diet. What does that usually look like? What kind of sugars are people usually trying to cut out?
Most people, when they're trying to cut out sugar, they're talking about added sugar. So sugar that gets added to a processed food, a cooked food. That's like table sugar or honey or high fructose corn syrup.
My king, this corn syrup was just delivered.
Generally, it's recommended that you're somewhere but under, ideally, 5% of your calories from added sugar. So for a 2,000 calorie diet, that's 25 grams of added sugar.
And it turns out that added sugar can add up quick. I noticed the high levels in some of my daily snacks and the occasional foods I might get served on an airplane. While my old instinct was to throw food in my mouth, my new instinct was to check the back of the package and then throw my food at Natalie.
You're not aiming for 25 grams of sugar every day. It's like over the course of a week, over the course of a month, like some days are really low, some days are quite high. So that is where you can get the flexibility to have dessert on a special occasion. And I think that that's where, as a culture, we've really got off track, is we no longer have sugar relegated to desserts or special occasions, right? It's like in everything because we eat so much processed food.
Yeah, and it was surprising even for me. Like, I had watched Fed Up and these documentaries, and I read a lot of blog posts about how much sugar is in everything. I knew it, but then I was still surprised by certain things. Like, my granola bar was like 30 grams of sugar, and I'm like, that's why it tastes so good. And it's hard. I think it takes really looking at everything you're purchasing and really understanding that if it tastes too good to be true, it's probably.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason why food manufacturers put a lot of added sugar in things. It tastes good. It makes you want to buy it again. It's really straightforward. The problem is it's terrible for us.
Becca thought my 30-day no-sugar challenge was a good step to understanding how my body personally responds to sugar, but also stressed the importance of maintaining a healthy and balanced diet. If I'm being honest, my diet isn't always balanced and it can sometimes look a bit primitive. All right, so tonight's dinner can really only be described as a bowl of food. Here, let me show you guys what we're working with here. We've got your rice, your chicken, and your daily recommended bacon. I should be eating more veggies. I just realized that right now. I'm gonna start doing that soon, but first, bacon. I must not have had a terrible sugar addiction because I didn't experience any headaches or major discomfort outside of nightly cravings. To combat these cravings, I made some tea as a replacement. This really helped to keep my mind distracted. My biggest fear and motivation to go on this 30-day challenge is because I know how small changes make a big difference. Now, normally when I talk about small changes, it relates to positive change, but it also works in the opposite direction. Small bad habits like snacking on junk food can build up and compound to something much worse. What are you looking at?
Your dog.
You make those early excuses and justifications, but eventually you don't need to make them anymore because the bad habit sticks and you're running on autopilot. So I'm thankful that I got out in front of it before things got any worse. In the past, I had relied on smoothies to get most of my vitamins, but as a part of this challenge, I also wanted to cut back on fruit. While they do include vitamins, nutrients, and fibers that are good for you, I wanted to force myself to eat more greens. After the first 10 days, I started to prepare and eat healthier meals. For dinner, I'd have fish with brown rice and sauteed kale. Salads became my go-to meal because they were convenient and easy to prepare. We have curry cod with some brown rice and sauteed kale. In the kale, I actually sauteed it with some chicken broth, which I'm also going to be drinking here. This is like a bachelor meal. Natalie's definitely much better around the kitchen than I am. I primarily eat for sustenance while she cooks and eats for the love of the food.
That is extremely sweet.
So
nice.
Look at that. Double the sauce. I got no sauce. I found workarounds and substitutes for all meals that included sugar. Instead of fig jam sauce, I used mustard. Instead of vinegar, I used olive oil and a healthy squeeze of lemon, topped with some salt and pepper. 3 weeks in, and I noticed that my energy levels became more stable. No longer did I have huge swings of high to low energy throughout the day, especially as I tried to balance my diet out with protein, carbs, greens, and a little bit less bacon.
So what you're experiencing there is energy levels, but it's blood sugar fluctuations. So when you have lots of added sugar in your diet, you can get really big fluctuations in your blood sugar levels, which make you feel like you've got a lot of energy, and then, holy crap, you're crashing and you have no energy. And then what you typically do when you feel like you have no energy, especially if you're not paying attention, is to gravitate towards something that will give you quick energy, which sugar. You gravitate towards sugar, so you go back up. You feel good for a little while, and then you crash again.
In addition to more stable energy levels, I also noticed a significant reduction of my dad gut. It didn't disappear, but the tide had turned. All right, so the 30-day challenge is done, and I feel pretty good. There were a few things that I changed over the past 30 days. I did start going to the gym more now that I'm not traveling as much. I also reduced my carbs, partly because of the reduction in added sugar. And it's hard to pinpoint the exact percentage benefit that I received from getting rid of sugar. To steal a phrase from Dan Harris, I'd say maybe I was 10% healthier. It definitely made a huge difference in my energy levels and how I felt every day. And it was definitely nice to curb those cravings, because who knows how bad it could have gotten if I just kept snacking and kept going. My dad gut could have potentially turned into a grandpa gut, which would have been really scary. But going forward, I love sweets. I love dessert. I'm a big fan. And I don't want to just get rid of it completely, because I think in this life we need to actually enjoy things. But I want to bring it back in moderation. So starting next month, I'm going to experiment with a once-a-week cheat meal. And that starts tomorrow. If you'd like to get exclusive videos on habit change, filmmaking, business, and lifestyle design, go to patreon.com/MattDiavella. Get access to all my extended interviews, like my conversation with Becca Schern.
Sleep deprivation is epidemic. society.
Sign up today to immediately get 18 videos and 7 podcast episodes with new content coming every month. And if you want to take part in these 30-day challenges with me, I'm doing them all year and announcing them in 3 places: my newsletter, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find those links in the description below. Thanks for watching. Oh, that was a mistake. I feel sick. My stomach hurts. I ate like a donut and a half. And I still feel horrible. This is terrible. Look at this. This is bad. I need to give these donuts away to somebody.
Filming me?
Yeah.
I don't know how to act.
Thanks for taking these donuts.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye.
Happy birthday.
Diet is a major trigger for IBS flare-ups. Fortunately, there's a life-changing diet that helps many people manage their IBS symptoms and reduce the risk of worsening pelvic floor problems. Hi, I'm Michelle, and today I'm guiding you through this IBS diet, which is known as the FODMAP diet. And I'm talking to you about it with specific reference to pelvic floor and pelvic floor management. Now, we're going to be going through the trigger foods to avoid in this diet. I'm going to be taking you through the foods to choose in this diet. And I'm also going to be showing you some of the foods that work for me that I include to help me manage my IBS symptoms too. So you can skip straight to the timestamps below regarding the diet if you'd like to look at it now. Otherwise, there's some really important information I need to give you before commencing this diet. Now, I just want to tell you a little bit about the FODMAPs diet. FODMAPs are certain sugars that aren't well absorbed as they pass through the bowel. And what these sugars do is they can sit there and they can ferment, they can draw extra fluid into the bowel, they ferment causing gas and bloating, and that's what can then give you the abdominal pain and the abdominal cramping. And these certain sugars can also cause constipation and diarrhea, or this can alternate. Now, this condition can occur some of the time or all of the time. And if you need emergency management strategies for this condition, you can refer to my video above that outlines what to do straight away when this condition occurs. This video today is much more about prevention of these things. Now, to start the diet, what happens, and it's usually recommended to work through with a dietitian. That's a really important recommendation because it's quite a restrictive diet. If you can't work with a dietitian, the Monash University Diet app, the FODMAP app, is linked below and it's pictured up here. And I really strongly recommend you get this diet because these scientists have actually rigorously investigated this diet and also to the quantities of how much you can have and how much not to have, which is really important in this diet. Now, normally the diet starts with a 6-week elimination of all the trigger foods that I'm about to take you through. And then there's a gradual reintroduction over 8 to 12 weeks or maybe longer of one food at a time over 3 days. Now, we're about to go through the major food groups. So let's start with fruit. So you can see on screen some of the fruits to avoid. Now, the reason these fruits need to avoid is because they contain the fruit sugar called fructose. And what fructose does is causes gas and bloating in the bowel. And fruits with high levels of this sugar are those of the fruits to eliminate. And they're the ones that you can see on the screen now. Now, some of the fruits I want to make mention of in terms of, I'm going to make particular mention of prunes here because prunes are often one of those fruits that we tend to reach for if we're constipated. So watch out for prunes because they are dried plums and they are very high in fructose and they're also hard to digest. Now, if we look at fruits to choose, again with reference to the bowel, you can see the fruits to choose here. I want to make special mention of oranges and strawberries and also to kiwi fruit. Oranges and strawberries are high in fibre, so they're great for managing constipation if you suffer from pelvic floor problems, and also to kiwi fruit. So these are kiwi fruit or Chinese gooseberries as they're also known, and the Monash University recommends that
we start with 2 of these a day. So obviously they're peeled, and these are great because not only they're high in dietary fibre, that would be about 150 grams each, I think, a day. So not only are these high in fibre, but they also too have an enzyme, and it's the same enzyme that's in papaya and pineapple that actually softens or tenderises meat, and also so that can have a great effect on digestion and your ability to digest your food. So kiwi fruits, put them on your shopping list. Now let's move on to vegetables. Now, some of the common vegetables to avoid, again, you can see on this list here. When we're talking about vegetables to avoid, we really want to think about the most common culprits are, you've got your garlic and your onion, and these are often hidden in a lot of foods. And I should have mentioned with fruits, chilies too, but I'll mention here as well. These are major irritants and they're things to eliminate from your diet, okay? So these are actually fruits, but eliminate those, eliminate chilies, eliminate garlic and any garlic, maybe garlic products like your garlic salt, and look for the ingredients of these in the products that you have. They're strong irritants. Now, in terms of vegetables to choose, I've made like a nice easy salad here, and again you can see the vegetables to choose up here. But this is a salad I just quickly whipped up, and it's got spinach leaves, it's got baby tomatoes, red tomatoes, yellow tomatoes, and I choose these ones because they're lower in acid than the red ones, which are kind to my tummy. It's also got alfalfa and it's got some shredded carrot. So that's a simple FODMAP friendly salad that you can dish up. Now, if you want to make a dressing for this, you could use a little bit of olive oil or sesame seed oil, or you could use some lime juice or orange juice. But what I really like to use is tahini. And I get the whole tahini, and I actually sometimes mix this with lactose-free yogurt and put it over the top. And if I had had time, I would have put in some sweet potato into this salad as well. So there's some of the vegetables that you can choose. I want to make just a mention of a couple of other vegetables. Red capsicum and green beans are really great for constipation because they'll help soften your stool and help your pelvic floor problems. And the other food I want to mention is white mashed potato, the other vegetable to include. White mashed potato is really great at firming the stool if you suffer from diarrhea. So that might be a food that you like to include in your diet too. So let's move on now to protein sources. So in terms of proteins to avoid, one of the first things we reach for when we're constipated, and we're told this time and time again, is to reach for legumes. So we're told to reach for our beans, our kidney beans, our chickpeas, our lentils, and we know how good these are for our gut health. Unfortunately, these are major triggers for IBS sufferers. So these are things to eliminate right from the word go. Don't forget that things like hummus that you can see here and falafels are also a combination. Falafels are a combination of this, which is our chickpeas, and garlic. So that's a lethal combination, isn't it? So don't forget to actually think about the ingredients in the foods that you're choosing. So in terms of proteins to choose, you can choose most meats. Just make sure they're cooked simply. I personally suggest that you avoid fatty meats because a lot of fat can slow down digestion. So try to choose your lean meats, but you can have red meat. I have fish. I have eggs daily and include that in omelettes, which I cook with tomatoes and Asian greens. And the other protein source that I want to mention is tofu. Now we know that this is a great protein source, but if you're choosing tofu, choose the firm tofu, not the silken, which is a high in FODMAP food. Choose your firm tofu, which is your lower FODMAP alternative. All right, so now we're going to move on to dairy. Now on the foods to avoid for dairy, I just want to mention milk sugar because the milk sugar called lactose is what causes people a lot of intolerance. It causes bloating and it can cause terrible diarrhea. So many of us know a lot about lactose intolerance. The foods to avoid are all your milk products and your milk-based products, so like your yogurts, your ice creams, all those types of things that are based on milk. I also just too want to mention soybean milk or soy milk because if you have soy milk, remember what we said about beans? If it's actually made from soybeans, it's going to be a gut irritant, potential irritant, or IBS irritant. So you want to choose milk made from soybean extract. And fortunately, that's one of the less expensive options too. So just be mindful of that with your milk alternatives. Now, if we actually think about the types of products that we can have and thinking about our bowel and also to our pelvic floor, obviously you're going to go for your lactose-free milks, and there's a huge range of lactose-free products that we all know about. In terms of cheeses, this is where it can get a bit tricky for the pelvic floor. So hard cheeses, I eat quite a lot of hard cheeses, but just your plain hard cheeses. This is a Spanish manchego cheese, which I really like at the moment. But these cheeses, hard cheeses, can actually cause constipation in people that are prone to constipation. But conversely, if you're prone to diarrhea, they can be something that's really good to include in the diet. So just remember that about hard cheeses. You might want to just start off with a small amount of hard cheese if you're prone to constipation. Soft cheeses, you can include camembert, brie and feta, and they're all really nice options to include in your diet. Now, let's move along to grains and cereals and bread. So this is where a lot of people come unstuck because wheat is a major IBS flare-up trigger. So you need to eliminate all products that are made from either wheat, barley or rye. So that makes your gluten-free products semi-safe, doesn't it? So long as they don't include, your gluten-free bread, so long as they don't include fruit, dried fruit. So the breads that you can include are things like your sourdough, so your sourdough bread, your spelt bread, and also to the safe gluten-free breads. Now on bread, gluten-free bread, white bread will firm the stool. So if you're having a lot of gluten-free white bread, just again be careful of that with constipation, or conversely if you suffer from diarrhea, might be something that you like to include. Now, one of my big tips for cereals is this. So I usually make a smoothie in the morning out of oats. That's one of the things I include with my lactose-free milk. But baby rice cereal is an absolute gem. It's really easy to digest, so Far-X or the baby rice cereal. But the wonderful thing about this, not only is it really easy to digest, it's actually iron fortified and calcium fortified. So for someone like me that doesn't eat a lot of red meat, and perhaps that might be you too, this is a really nice way of getting iron, because we know that our iron supplements can cause constipation, and that affects our pelvic floor. So I find that these are a really great way of actually increasing my iron consumption, but also to getting a really nice little plain cereal. And this also too goes into my smoothie, which I'll show you in a little while. So that's a really nice option for your cereals. I also too wanted to mention boiled rice. Boiled white rice is a great food that you can include in your diet. Again, that's a stool firming product. And I also too wanted to mention just plain rice crackers. So I snack on these just plain rice crackers during the course of the day as well. So rice crackers, rice cakes, all those sorts of things are fine to include in your diet. Now we're just about to finish up. We're going to move on now to nuts, seeds, and also to sweets, topics that are close to my heart. So if we look at the nuts to avoid, things like your cashews and your pistachios are the ones to eliminate. But fortunately, you can still have walnuts, you can have peanuts, which means you can have peanut paste, and you can also have macadamia nuts, which means you can have macadamia nut paste too. Now, seeds are where things really come into play for your bowel management. And I love the fact that on the low FODMAP elimination diet, you can have chia seeds. So I've got chia seeds here. You can see them here, little black seeds. These are a great source of dietary fibre. Now what happens, I soak these overnight just to show you in milk. That's the volume increase that you get with this. And the chia seeds become like a gel-like, I don't know if you can see it on screen, but they become like a gel-like consistency. So I put this in my smoothies. So I'll make a smoothie in the morning. And this is my smoothie. So obviously it's got the baby rice cereal in it, it's got yogurt, it's got kiwi fruit in it, and it's also got the chia seeds. Really yummy. So it actually looks like that. So that makes, and you can also add some gluten-free protein powder to it as well, which is what I often do as well. So making sure that it's low FODMAP. So you can make a really nice, filling, healthy smoothie from these types of seeds. The other types of seeds that you can include are linseeds or flax seeds. So they're your flax seeds. And again, it's a myth now that these cause diverticulitis. They actually have been shown not to, but you can actually then blend these up with your smoothies as well. So I tend to blend up my seeds and they just tend to work well with my stomach. The other thing that I've found recently too is these grain biscuits. So these are biscuits and they seem to be readily available everywhere. They're just made from grains, so just linseeds, pepita seeds, which you can have. I think they've got some chia seeds in them as well. This is the packet in Australia, but I'm sure they're available worldwide. Just read your ingredients and make sure there's no other additives. There's some thickener in there and there's some salt, and that's it, and they are just delicious to snack on. Now, finally, what do I need to move on to? Sweets. So, things to avoid. In the US, high fructose corn syrup, major IBS trigger. Make sure you avoid the high fructose corn syrup. It's in everything. You need to read your labels. Honey, just because it's natural, it's not IBS friendly, so eliminate that from your diet as well. And the other important thing that I want to mention, and I've got a close up here that you can see of the label, is your artificial sweeteners. So there's a dose-dependent effect of these. You can actually see on the label that excess consumption can cause a laxative effect. It's true, the more you have, the more likely some artificial sweeteners like xylitol and mannitol can actually have on your bowel and cause your IBS symptoms. So alternatives, your safe alternatives are things like pure maple syrup. Fortunately, don't get the cheap stuff. Make sure you get the actual pure. This is pure Canadian maple syrup. Also too, you can have rice syrup. You can have plain white sugar. And fortunately, last but not least, one of my favourite things, and the packet was already open this morning when I got it out of the cupboard, dark chocolate. You can have dark chocolate as your sweets as well. If you've got a question about caffeine, and people ask me about coffee, caffeine is a bowel irritant, or coffee is a bowel irritant, so that's something to avoid in this diet, unfortunately. But we've gone through a lot of things there, haven't we? We've talked about the foods to choose, we've talked about the foods to avoid on the elimination diet, but this is just the elimination diet. Then you gradually reintroduce extra foods, and this is where it's really important to work with a dietitian. Once again, I'll reiterate the importance of the Monash app. Grab it if you haven't already got it. It's a great little app to have. I really hope this information today helps you manage your IBS symptoms. Don't forget, coming up is the emergency management video for IBS, if you want to stay with me for that. And if you've liked the video, please make sure you give it a like below, because then that helps YouTube recommend it to other viewers and they can find it as well too. Look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.
Hi, I'm Dr. Mike Evans, and today I'm talking about healthy eating. It's a huge topic. Eating seems simple, but it's actually pretty complex, so I thought I would just focus on what I'd say if you and I sat down in the clinic. I might start by wondering what we're shooting for. Weight loss, less overeating, healthy eating, a longer, better life. Then sticking with the big picture, I'd point out that eating is just one behavior in a healthy cascade. Exercising regularly leads to better stress management and sleep, which leads to better food decisions, to more energy, less chronic disease, and so on. If it's weight loss you're after, that's easy conceptually. Don't eat as much and move more. The problem is it's not so easy keeping up this energy balance in the real world. In industrialized countries, we are surrounded by a limitless supply of inexpensive, tasty, supersized, high-calorie food. The other side of the energy balance equation, i.e. activity, has also changed as our generation has a severe case of sitting disease. Nightly TV, commutes, spectacular video games, moving sidewalks, and most of us now are sitting knowledge workers. Our culture pushes us towards the easy button instead of making our days harder. On the other side of the equation, I think it's important to remember that eating is grand. Food brings together families, builds communities, and gives us health. Okay, so let's start with the question I most often get about eating. What's the best diet for losing weight? I'm not surprised people are confused. While you're watching this video, there's probably a pop-up window from the diet industry telling you about a diet, a detox, or a superfood. Not to mention the Hollywood star that just started that diet. No research has shown convincingly that one commercial diet trumps all the rest. The only thing that predicted success in head-to-head trials was how well you stuck to whichever diet you picked. So to reframe this, our society lurches from diet to diet looking for some magic formula. But it's not the formula as much as the pattern. Instead of obsessing about the exact composition of a diet, the science tells us to choose the one you like the best and can actually stick to. A Cochrane meta-analysis in 2015 looking at what bumped the success of commercial weight loss diets showed it wasn't less carbs or fat, it was more structure and more in-person social support. Really, diets are just food rules that influence our pattern of eating, or what the economists call a commitment device, what self-aware people do to improve their chances of controlling future irrational or impulsive behaviors. So instead of autopilot, you follow a food rule that nudges you towards certain eating decisions, mostly less overeating. Each commercial diet has their own magic formula of what we call macronutrients, so low carb, high protein, low fat, sugar, and so on. And they typically have a story to go with it, so you can eat like a caveman or use a scoring system, or it's prepackaged, or a famous doctor's take, or whatever. And I suppose my two messages with macronutrients are, one, I think we spend too much time and energy focusing on them, and two, it's really more about quality than quantity. Low carb? Well, carbs can be healthy in their complex form, fruits, veggies, legumes, whole grains, and not so healthy in their simple form, like free sugars and refined starches. Let's face it, carbs taste awesome, and our society tends to overeat them. So people who restrict their intake tend to lose weight. However, when we study relative weight loss outcomes, a 2014 systematic review by Dr. Celeste Naud and colleagues looked at weight and cardiovascular markers of at-risk people on low-carb diets that were followed for up to 2 years, and they found no difference compared to balanced weight loss diets. So how about lowering sugar? Well, if I had to pick one word to describe sugar in industrialized societies, it would be sneaky. So much sugar has worked its way into our diets. I mean, many drinks have 8 or more teaspoons of sugar. The average American intake is approximately 20 teaspoons of sugar a day, more in teenagers and less in Canada. It's the obvious sweets, but it's also foods we think of as healthy, so cereals and granola bars and fruit juices. When high sugar contributes to excess calories, that is when we seem to get into trouble. One interesting caveat is that when I diagnose patients with prediabetes, the first thing they do is drop sugar from their diet. However, when we look at the diabetes prevention trials, it was less about sugar restriction and more about the healthy cascade of being active half hour a day, 5 to 7% weight loss, eating less saturated fats, and eating more fiber that reduce risk of progression to diabetes by 58%. How about low fat? Well, I think our story has changed on fat, from all bad to, again, more of a continuum. You have your trans fats, so fried fast food, many packaged baked goods, not so good, and we're reducing these. We have saturated fats, mostly in dairy and red meat and plant oils like coconut or palm. These seem not so good in excess, but okay in moderation. Then we have your monounsaturated fats, or MUFA. The Mediterranean diet, which I'll discuss in a second, is pretty high in MUFA, so avocados, nuts, seeds, olive oil, dark chocolate, and shows health benefits. Finally, we have PUFAs, so these are the longer chain fats found in oily fishes. Early trials showed some reduction in cardiac events. More recent trials not so enthusiastic. Meta-analysis still showing some small benefit and no harm, so the suggestion is at least 2 servings a week. People seem to do better when they replace saturated fats with MUFA and PUFA fats. What about high protein diets? Again, it's more quality than quantity. Protein can come in different packages with different health effects. So, say comparing a high salt ham steak versus a salmon steak or lentils or a handful of almonds. Most data points that if you eat healthy protein, white meat, nuts, beans, fish, you do better, especially if it is spread throughout the day, perhaps most importantly at breakfast. There are also some diets showing good results in people with disease. So the DASH diet dropping high blood pressure by 5 to 11 millimeters of mercury, or low glycemic index diet dropping A1C, the measurement for blood sugar over time, in people with diabetes by 0.5 percentage points. Many of our patients have high cholesterol, and Dr. David Jenkins and his colleagues here at the University of Toronto have shown they can reduce cholesterol by 35% with the portfolio diet. The data for vegetarianism has largely come from cohort studies and now some randomized trials showing that people do better. It's hard not to conclude that a diet rich in plant-based, unprocessed foods is a smart diet. And of course, many people make the excellent point that the burden on our planet is less with a vegetarian or vegan or local diets. One way to think about all this is to reflect on Brazil's new dietary guidelines. Here they shifted from focusing on the perfect macronutrient mix towards more appreciation of food. Stepping back a bit to see, We're buying more ultra-processed foods and packaged foods that can be eaten anywhere. And that maybe there's an opportunity for healthier eating and better relationships by encouraging creating meals with your family and friends. Okay, if there's no magic formula, is there a diet that actually does work? I think the answer is yes. The diet is more about culture and small behaviors, a diet not focused on weight loss but on healthy outcomes like less cancer, heart disease, dementia, and a longer life. The diet with the most robust evidence is a Mediterranean diet. Instead of food rules or absolutes, this is more about moderation. Less meat, more veggies, fruit for dessert. Think shopping at the market or at least at the outer aisles of a grocery store, not the processed foods for sale in the inner aisles. It's called the Mediterranean diet, but really it's more of a lifestyle, a region that traditionally includes lots of physical activity, regular meals, and good social support. So let's continue this shift from diets to healthy behaviors that affect our eating by looking at the National Weight Control Registry. The NWCR administers annual questionnaires to more than 10,000 people, more women than men, who have lost quite a bit of weight and kept it off for more than a year. Not surprisingly, 98% said they modified their food intake in some way, and 94% increased their activity levels. But there wasn't one formula. Most restricted some foods, some counted calories, others ate all foods, just limited their quantities. 78% ate breakfast every day. The majority watched less than 10 hours of TV and ate out just 3 times a week. And these people generally exceeded the prescribed half-hour a day of activity, averaging an hour a day, mostly walking. Nearly all registry members indicated that weight loss led to improvements in their level of energy, physical mobility, general mood, self-confidence, and physical health. Feedback loops seem important. Losing weight is one thing, but it seems like the trickier part, at least for about 80% of us, is keeping it off. Weighing yourself and using this as a small nudge in your daily food decisions is an example. 75% of NWCR subjects weighed themselves weekly, 36% daily. And they looked at this more closely at the Stop Regain trial, where daily self-weighing was associated with a decreased risk of regaining 2.3 kilograms or 5 pounds on average. Another feedback nudge is a food diary, even just for a week, and easier now with apps. Patients find this so simple they don't do it, but seeing what you've eaten can actually double your weight loss. So I think awareness is undersold. It might be what you're eating or weighing, but it's also about knowing that life is messy and to enjoy it we need some flexibility, or that you simply feel better when you eat better. That's why I like the idea of starting with small changes, or as I call them, tweaks. Maybe switch something you do a lot. So, for example, eating breakfast, snacking, drinking. You could switch your average cereal for some oatmeal or shredded wheat, a handful of almonds instead of a bag of chips. Maybe switch 3 of your colored drinks a day to water. I know this doesn't sound too sexy, but the Dr. Mike Switcheroo diet might actually chip away at a pound a week, or better yet, might make you feel better. Another angle is adding instead of subtracting. So Dr. Sherry Pagoto and colleagues randomized metabolically at-risk individuals to either a multifaceted American Heart Association diet versus the simpler advice of just increasing fiber to 30 grams throughout the day. So getting on the bran wagon, a trip to Beantown, berry picking. Both groups lost weight, the HA group slightly more, and both improved cardiovascular markers. Now, I like this idea of pushing healthier food rather than just restricting or fencing off other food. Other data has shown satiety, our feeling of being full, is not just about calories. Calories that come from proteins and fibers actually can make us feel more full. Another angle is social support, which can actually help our eating behaviors. Another study where people were either going it alone versus having 3 or more friends or family members supporting them. Maintaining weight loss at 10 months jumped from 24 to 66%. On the subject of support, having a dietitian, even if just online, helps. They're like a genius bar for your eating. Activity is interesting in the context of eating. Research shows us that people who are active, even when they have obesity, live longer than skinny sedentaries. So when my patients tell me they are active but have been unsuccessful at weight loss, I shrug my shoulders and say, actually, you have been successful. You're active. It's easier to drop calories through diet, but I think it's important to know that the research shows that people who exercise have more success at maintaining their weight. My final 2 points about healthy eating focus on this long-term play and attitude. As restrictive diets have proven hard to sustain, many are now turning from the individual to what surrounds the individual, changing our eating environment to make it easier to make the right choice day after day. We call this redesigned choice architecture and involves 2 types of what I call, quote, nudge awareness. First is knowing that our world is full of triggers towards unhealthy or overeating. Convenient, shiny foods at the counter, supersizing, marketing. As Dr. Brian Wansing points out, most of us don't overeat because we're hungry. Secondly is an awareness of what nudges you personally. We are creatures of habit. We do the same thing every week. And each of us has cues, certain foods, pastries at the coffee counter, a time, 11, 3, or 10, a predictable stressor. As Wansing says, the opportunity here is to re-engineer small behaviors that move you from mindless overeating to mindless better eating. Maybe it's redesigning your kitchen. When you leave cookies on the counter, they are much more likely to be eaten. But the same is true for fruits and veggies. Smaller plates, glasses, less supersized containers, and not eating from the bag are simple nudges to reduce mindless eating. Redesign takes some self-knowledge. Are you a nighttime nibbler or an emotional eater? I'm a grazer. I'll eat whatever is there, so my change is at the grocery store. I know it's pathetic. I should cut fruits myself, but mindless healthy eating happens for me when I buy pre-cut fruit. And just like I might tell a smoker not to have cigarettes in the house, I also don't buy super sour Jute juice because I can't stop eating those things. My final behavior is more of an attitude, 80-20. So if you're making the healthier choice 80% of the time and your 20% is not too high cal, I and you should be thrilled. Having a piece of dark chocolate, a good meal out, some pie. We're into this for the long term, so I'm not looking for perfection. I'm looking for consistency. So in the end, I hope I've got you to think a bit differently about how you eat. Instead of investing in a single diet, a portfolio of behaviors. Small tweaks over big changes. Single ingredient foods over multi-ingredient and processed foods. Dinner at home, self-awareness. Depending less on constant willpower and more on tweaking your week to make mindless healthy eating more likely. My final point is more about health at every size. I get that people want weight loss and obesity as a risk factor for disease. But honestly, if my patients can work with their factory settings to be more mindful of their eating, move more, a bit more self-love, and start thinking more about what's healthy to eat rather than what not to eat, I'd be happy. So maybe now is the time to start your very own Better Life experiment. Thanks for listening.
So when you get up in the morning, you probably feel pretty free to choose what you're going to do. But my guess is the first thing you do is reach for one of these, my cell phone. It gives me continuous access to an online, all-you-can-eat buffet. I can enter a virtual gambling casino, get hooked on a little app or a game. Hey, shop till I drop. I gotta be honest with you. I cannot not look at this thing when it pings with a new text message. And I am one of the 78% of Americans who can't get up out of bed in the morning without checking this thing first. Sometimes I don't even notice I'm reaching for it. I just do it. Now, here's a product you probably don't have in your pocket. This is powdered alcohol. I'm not kidding. Palcohol. It's going to be out on the market this year. So I can just carry around this convenient little package, and mix myself up a cocktail whenever, wherever I want. Maybe I should add it to my morning coffee at work. It might jazz things up a bit. So here's my point. At no time in human history has our species been so bombarded by stuff designed to get us hooked. Companies compete on the very basis of creating ever more habit-forming products. And it's no different with our food. Food corporations hire scientists to engineer the most irresistible habit-forming foods. Sugar is currently their go-to ingredient. These guys have flipped the script on us. They are using the very brain imaging technologies that we use to try to find cures for addiction. Only they put people in the MRI machine and feed them Dorito chips to figure out ways to tweak the recipe to make it even more habit-forming than it already is. So here's my question to you. When you live in a world that is surrounding you on a 24/7 basis with food products scientifically engineered to be habit-forming, do you really have freedom of choice? Now, most addictive substances are actually quite safe in their natural form. Heroin comes from poppy seeds, cocaine from the coca plant, alcohol from fruits and grains. For centuries, farmers high up in the Andes Mountains have chewed coca leaves. It's a tradition. It's a mild stimulant, like drinking a cup of coffee. It helps them work longer hours and cope with the high altitudes. Probably the worst thing that can happen to you after a lifetime of chewing coca leaves is maybe you'll get bad teeth. Things do get really bad when we industrialize the coca production process. When we learned how to refine the coca plant down into its most concentrated form, a little rock of white powder. That's when the humble coca leaf becomes the lethally addictive drug we know as crack. Now, what's interesting is that up until the 20th century, cocaine was actually an innocent, domesticated white powder, just like sugar is today. People put it in everything. You could go to your drugstore and buy it in a soothing tonic. People put it in cough syrup and gave it to their kids. Coca-Cola is one of the most successful products in modern history. It was formulated in the 1880s, and the company's founders were so proud of their special recipe that they vowed never to change it. But at one time in history, the Coca-Cola Corporation was forced to change its recipe. And that was in 1903, when the political current, the tide was shifting away from cocaine, eventually to make it an illegal drug. That's when Coca-Cola took the cocaine out of the Coke. Of course, they just replaced it with a different addictive substance, namely caffeine. So here you have it. A concentrated dose of sugar combined with a concentrated dose of caffeine. Double the pleasure, double the chances we'll get hooked. The fact is, as long as food corporations aren't breaking narcotics laws, they can do pretty much whatever they want to formulate their products to make them even more habit-forming. My work takes me into San Francisco's Tenderloin district. Every big city has a place like this, right? It's a few square blocks of extreme poverty and urban blight. There's a liquor store on every corner, usually with a bunch of drug dealers hanging out in front. We have a name for places like this. We call them alcohol and drug saturated environments. Now, the Tenderloin has a program called Safe Passage. Volunteers go to the school bus and pick up children to safely walk them to their homes. They have to travel circuitous routes through the city streets to avoid all the drug dealers and liquor stores. It's like living in an obstacle course. When it comes to food, to processed food and sugar, we're all living in an obstacle course. Our own tenderloin. It's on every corner, in every store, in every workplace. 74% of the foods in your grocery store have sugar added to them, stuff that doesn't even taste sweet. So, why do I care about this so much? It's actually not the rising rates of obesity worldwide that keeps me up at night. It's two other very disturbing trends. And the first is the appearance of adult diseases in children. Type 2 diabetes is linked to heavy sugar consumption and especially sugary drinks. It's called adult onset diabetes because in my parents' generation, we only saw it in adults. Today, 1 out of 4 American teenagers is pre-diabetic or diabetic. Next is the appearance of whole new diseases that seem to come out of nowhere. The diagnosis non-alcoholic fatty liver disease didn't even exist until 1980. Again, a condition linked to heavy sugar consumption and poor diet. By 2020, in 5 years, it's going to be the leading cause of liver transplantation. This is the global warming of human health. These trends are warning signs like melting icebergs and rising sea levels. They're telling us that there's something very wrong with our food environment. Our food supply is making some of us very sick. Here's the good news. There is some good news. The solutions to this situation are easily within our reach. Now, everybody always says, educate the public in healthy choices, but we know that doesn't work. If it worked, then why would 48% of Americans still be drinking a sugary drink or more a day? The fact is, I could say until I'm blue in the face, don't drink that stuff, it's unhealthy. You already know that. But when you live in a sugar-saturated environment, more often than not, you'll probably just reach for what's been put in front of you. And if it's a concentrated source of pleasure, a product carefully engineered with white powders to get you hooked, that puts a huge burden on you all the time to say no. And many of us don't. So what do we do about this problem? How do we fix it? The solutions are actually remarkably simple, and here's how it works. Food companies have gotten very good at seducing us towards their products in ways that we barely even notice. All of the most effective public health strategies just do the opposite. They gently nudge us away from the unhealthy stuff. It's simple. We just flip the script back. So, for example, soda companies, they intentionally keep their prices down so that we'll buy more. If we put a tax on the soda, that raises the price a little and gently nudges us away. If food corporations are barraging our children with advertisements for Captain Crunch and Cocoa Puffs, we can just take those ads off the air. If they pay grocery stores to put candy at eye level for our little children, we can put it a little higher on the shelf. And if they pay famous sports figures to promote Gatorade, we can pay them to say, I drink water. Small changes can add up to big shifts in the environment. We know this from decades of research on addictive substances. I understand we really would all like to believe that we're in charge, that we have complete freedom over what we eat. But how free can we be living in a saturated environment, one that continuously surrounds us with food products carefully engineered to get us hooked and keep us coming back for more. Those kids in the Tenderloin, they apparently live in what's called a food desert. They don't even have access to a grocery store. But really, what's a grocery store when it's stuffed with junk food, 74% of it loaded with added sugar? All the health experts will tell you, shop around the perimeter of the grocery store. That way you can steer your way around all the junk that's in the middle. But how different is that from a strategy that steers children around drug dealers in the Tenderloin? We can do so much better than this. We don't have to live in an environment that is rigged to get us fat and then blames us for the health consequences and the medical bills. We don't have to sit by and watch our children suffer from diseases of adulthood. We can re-rig this environment to make it safe. It's not about personal choice anymore. It's about our public choice. Thank you.
Hello and welcome. My name is Christina Riciopo. I'm a registered dietitian and chef, and I'm here today to talk to you about eating well and living well. And so let's begin our discussion and talk about why we should choose to eat a healthy diet. Eating a healthy diet not only can help promote and maintain a healthy weight, and this is something that a lot of people are focused on in the short term, but in the long term, eating well can decrease your risk of chronic disease. It can promote regular bowel health, which in turn promotes good health as we age. It can prevent nutritional deficiencies and also to promote good bone health. And I think probably the best reason to eat healthy is because it allows us to pursue and have energy for the things that we love to do. So in this presentation, we're going to start from the very beginning. We're going to review the macronutrients of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. We're going to equip you with the tools to read food labels, to do some meal planning, give you some tips for success, and also for our San Antonio viewers, give you some community resources. So what we're going to be discussing in this presentation is overall healthy eating, a diet that focuses on lots of fruits and vegetables and unprocessed whole grains, lean sources of protein, including fish, poultry, and legumes, and excluding very processed forms of protein. Choosing heart-healthy fats, so we'll talk about the best kinds of fats to have, and also how to minimize saturated and trans fat, as well as sugary sources of sugar, sugary drinks and desserts. So before we get started, we're going to test your knowledge and think about this question. Is this true or false? Frozen or canned fruits and vegetables are not as nutritious as fresh. And this is false. Frozen and canned fruits and vegetables are picked, harvested, and processed at the peak of ripeness. Frozen tends to hold a little bit more nutrition in the long run, but either one of these are great options. So the very first macronutrient that we're going to be talking about is carbohydrates. This is the primary source of energy for us. Carbohydrates are sources of food that turn into glucose and give us energy. And it's recommended that 45 to 60% of our total daily intake of calories comes from carbohydrates. And a lot of people know pastas, breads to have carbohydrates, but there's a lot of other sources. These includes, you can see fruit, vegetables, also milk and dairy products have carbohydrate, and then of course anything, any kind of dessert, anything containing sugar has carbohydrate. And so we really want to focus on complex carbohydrates, the ones that break down slowly. These are fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. So here's another question to test your knowledge. If a food has 0 grams of sugar in it, it means that it is the same as having 0 grams of carbohydrate. And this is also false. So there are a lot of different kinds of carbohydrates, as I just mentioned, and we'll talk a little bit more about label reading later on in the presentation. From carbohydrates, these are the main sources of fiber in our diet. Again, fruits, vegetables, whole grains. And fiber is really important because it helps to promote gastrointestinal health, keeps you full, satiated during the day. Getting plenty of fiber can also help to lower your risk of heart disease and manage your cholesterol. And fiber is also really great for keeping your blood sugar even throughout the day. So there are two different kinds of fiber. One is soluble fiber, and this is the kind that absorbs water. When you eat food sources of soluble fiber, it bulks in your digestive tract and helps to keep you regular. Sources of these include oatmeal, oat bran, nuts and seeds, and you can also get this from some fruits. It's mostly the inner part of the fruit. And insoluble fiber comes from the husk of a whole grain product. It comes from the skin of a vegetable or fruit, and insoluble fiber is what creates the wave-like contractions in your intestines that help promote motility and things moving well through your digestive tract. And you can see the general recommendations up top for women and for men. And these are just very general. You really want to speak with your dietitian or physician before you make any specific changes to your diet, but these are just general recommendations. Let's test your knowledge again. Fact or fiction? It's easy to spot whole grain food products because they are brown. And this is also fiction. So what you want to do is pick up the food product that you're looking at. Bread is a really good example here. If whole grain is in the first ingredient, that's a good indicator that it's a good quality whole grain product. A lot of times manufacturers will add molasses or brown sugar to bread products and make them look more nutritious or whole grain, but it's really just, it's not a sign of a quality product. Okay, so the next macronutrient that we'll be discussing is protein. Protein is very important. It's a part of every cell, tissue, and organ in our bodies. It helps to fight infection. It helps strengthen our immune system. So again, here are some general recommendations for women and men 19 to 70 years old for protein. This is very individual, I'll add. So if you want very specific recommendations, talk to your dietitian or your physician. But the way that we get protein is from all of the things that you can see here on the left-hand side of the screen. Of course, we know meats, poultry, fish. Also, legumes and beans are great sources of protein. Tofu and eggs, nuts and seeds, milk and dairy products, yogurt, cottage cheese, that sort of thing. And also some from grains and vegetables, but these are very small amounts that you get. The best sources of protein that you can get come from either lean meat products. You really want to stay away from your processed meat. So sausages, bologna, things like that are okay once in a while, but whole muscle meat is the best source of protein. And you can, you have a few options. You want to not take in too much fat because protein can be a source of saturated fat. You want to trim away any visible fat either before cooking, or sometimes what I like to recommend is that you cook your meat with the fat on it, and a lot of it will melt away. It helps to insulate what you're making, and then you can trim away excess fat before you eat it. If you want to reduce the amount of meat that you're eating, you can substitute beans or black beans for meat in chili or tacos. And also, as I mentioned before, dairy products are a good source of protein as well. And finally, the last macronutrient that we'll be discussing is fat. And fat is the storage form of energy in the body. It has a lot of really important functions. It helps to insulate our organs. It helps to regulate our body temperature. And it's recommended that we take in 20 to 35% of our calories from fat a day. So that actually makes up a good amount of our diet. And so what I really like to emphasize to my clients and patients is that getting the right kind of fat is what you want to focus on rather than taking away too much. In the next few slides, we'll be discussing the healthiest sources of fat. So there are two types of fats. There is unsaturated fat and saturated. Saturated is the type of fat that we want to limit in our diet, not take away completely, but limit. And unsaturated fat is the type of fat that we want to get the most of. These are the types of fats that decrease LDL and increase HDL. and also provide lots of other nutrients, vitamin E, antioxidants, and these come from olive oil, nuts and seeds, avocados, and from fish. So here are two other sources of fat. There is cholesterol, which we want to have moderate intake of in the diet, and this comes from animal products again, and then trans fat. Trans fat is a type of fat that is manufactured. It comes from processed foods, fast food, things that you find on the shelf at the grocery store that have partially hydrogenated oil, and these are the kinds of fats that you really want to stay away from as much as possible. So again, saturated fat, it mostly comes from animal sources, and this is the type of fat in some people raises total cholesterol and LDL levels and has been linked to an increased risk of cardiovascular disease. And as I mentioned before, trans fat coming from very processed foods, it increases LDL, decreases healthy HDL, and increases risk of cardiovascular disease. So another type of fat that has gotten a lot of recognition recently in the media and in publications, and rightly so, are omega-3 fats. And these are fats that are really important for brain function. They can reduce your risk of heart disease and decrease inflammation. And they might mainly come from fish products. So trout, herring, salmon, also mackerel, sardines are great sources. Secondary, walnuts and flaxseed do have some omega-3, and also a small amount in soybean oil and canola oil. We're going to talk a little bit about food labels and how to navigate them and actually really understand what is in your food. All right, so here is a sample nutrition fact image. So what you really want to do is start at the top. And what a lot of my patients don't understand is that the nutrition facts that are listed there, it's not for the entirety of the package, it's for one serving. So you really want to know what you're getting, what size serving you're getting for all of the nutrients that are listed there. So for example, this is a 1 cup serving. So as we keep going down, you can see the calorie content, you can see the total fat, and that's broken down into saturated and trans fat. You can see how many milligrams of cholesterol, sodium, and also the total carbohydrate. And remember, this is for 1 cup. So if you were to have 2 cups of this food product, you would have to multiply all of these things by 2. So there are a few nutrients on that label that you want to try and limit as much as possible. Sodium is a big one. Most of the sodium that we eat actually comes from packaged food products rather than the salt shaker on the table. So be very aware when you're eating a packaged food of how much salt you're getting. Salt and sodium are one and the same. Same with cholesterol and total fat, and you really want to pay attention to the trans fat that's coming from the food product. Just make sure that it's a low number, 0 if possible. And what you want to do is get more of the nutrients that you see here on the right-hand side. Dietary fiber, vitamin A, vitamin C, calcium, and iron. And so those are the nutrients that you want to get the most of and focus on more. Fact or fiction, food companies are allowed to have as much as 20% error on the nutrition facts label. And this is true. So it's not always a perfect science, and even with trans fat, for example, if the trans fat is less than 1 gram or is 0.5 grams, they can list it as 0 grams. So you have to take this information with a little bit of caution. Okay, and food labels. You really, as I had mentioned a little bit earlier, checking the ingredient list on your food labels, if you've never done it before, it can be a very enlightening experience. So look at this sample ingredient list from this loaf of bread. You can see there are a ton of ingredients in there, many of which are not identifiable. It's for the average consumer, we don't know what those are. And so I think that that's a good time to take pause and say, okay, is there another bread on the shelf that I can find that has maybe a little bit less ingredients? Because that's a sign that it's a less processed product. Okay, and as I was mentioning before about trans fat, and sometimes it'll label trans fat as 0 when really there is 0.5 to 1 gram of trans fat in the product. But the way that you can always know if there's trans fat in your food is if you look at the ingredient list and you see partially hydrogenated oil. And this is a complete giveaway that there's trans fat in your food. and that it is not a healthy product. Okay, so here on this slide, you can see a sample of different claims that you might see on food packages. So, hit the pause button and take a close look at this because some of these are regulated terms. So if a food is cholesterol free, it is required that it has less than 2 milligrams of cholesterol in that product. So take a look through these, and if you have been prescribed a low sodium diet or a low sugar diet, then you can use some of these claims to help you navigate what you see in the stores. Okay, so fact or fiction, I should limit my daily salt intake to about 1 teaspoon. And this, I will say that this really depends on the person. For the average consumer, we recommend 2,000 milligram or 2 gram serving of salt per day. And this is a very small amount. And especially if your doctor has mentioned that you have hypertension or you've spoken with your dietitian, they want you to limit your salt. Okay, so next we're going to discuss how to plan your meals. Fact or fiction, in a healthy eating plan, all the foods I eat should be low in fat. And this is not necessarily true. I'll say this is fiction. So what I think is more important is to focus on the type of fat that you're getting. Again, just like we were saying before, those unsaturated sources of fat, avocados, nuts and seeds, olive oil, fish, these are great sources of fat, and getting plenty of those are a good thing. So one strategy for healthy eating is to plan your meals. And it's a good idea to spend a little bit of time, even just 20 minutes a week, looking for recipes, getting new ideas, and taking a trip to the grocery store and getting everything that you need for that week. And also just keeping a lot of things stocked up at your house in the event that you need to throw something together very quickly. Frozen vegetables, pre-cooked chicken breast. The freezer section is a really good option for this, and there's a lot of things you can find that are convenient but still healthy. And this is, we used to have the food pyramid, and it has had a couple different evolutions, and this is the most recent way that it is recommended that you structure your meals. And this way you get a variety of all different types of foods. So you get a good source of protein, and that's a good portion size there, that lower quarter of the plate, having some whole grains, and then filling half of your plate with fruits and vegetables. And in the little circle to the upper right, that is a dairy product, which it's recommended that you get 3 servings of dairy a day. Okay, so just so you cover all your bases, plan for 3 meals a day. And so you really want to, as I just mentioned, make half of your plate bright, colorful, the more colorful the better, fruits and vegetables. Picking whole grains, a great source of fiber. So if you're choosing and planning your meals, stick with brown rice, whole grain pasta, rolled oats for breakfast. These are really easy ways to get more whole grains in your diet. And also switching to low-fat versions of milk, yogurt, and cheese. And then, switch up your proteins. So you can get this in a lot of different ways. And adopting, vegetable-based protein is a good idea too, just for extra fiber. So beans, peas, in addition to your meats and eggs. When you're planning your meals, it's really important to be aware of portion sizes. This can be especially true if you're eating out at a restaurant. Portion sizes are usually way bigger than they need to be. Usually double, at least. So if you use your hand as a guide, planning your meals, it's really important to be aware of portion sizes because it can be very easy to overdo it, especially when we eat out at restaurants. So in this diagram here, you can see how useful it is just to use your own hand as a way to measure portion sizes. From half of your fist being half a cup, whole fist, 1 cup, a 3-ounce portion in general of protein is the palm of your hand. A tablespoon is the tip of your thumb, and a teaspoon is the tip of your finger. So snacking can be a really great way for some people to manage their weight. For others, snacking is not such a great option, but if you're going to snack, choose things that are really nutrient dense. So nuts, fruits and vegetables, whole grain toast or an avocado, something that is going to give you a lot of nutrition and a good amount of calories, but not overdo it. And then it's also important to think like, okay, so am I really hungry? Sometimes we eat because we're bored or stressed. And in these instances, it's good to just give yourself a good portion and to just stop it there. if you are truly hungry, eat a meal, but if you are not, then try to identify why you're eating. So planning ahead is one of the very best strategies that you can use when trying to manage your weight and just have a well-rounded diet. You know, when we find ourselves out at the mall or grocery shopping as a big example, if you're hungry, you are not always going to make the best choices because you just want to eat something. So planning ahead and always have something on hand, even if it's, you know, a tangerine or, you know, a small bag of nuts, it's a really good way to avoid being stranded without food. And for those who are looking to, you know, maybe lose weight or maintain their current weight, choose a snack that has less than 200 calories. And this doesn't mean that it can't be very dense in nutrients. And so some examples here: peanut butter with a medium apple, a cup of tomato soup with some crackers, one of my favorites, tortilla with a quarter cup of black beans and some salsa. And you can see here, you can switch it up and still keep it interesting and satisfying, but not overly rich in calories. Snacking may keep me from becoming hungry and overeating at meal times. Now, this really depends on the person. Like I said, snacking works for some and doesn't for others. So it's a strategy. It's something that can keep you from becoming ravenous, but if you find that you overdo it with your snacks, well, then it might not be for you. And so this really just depends on the person. Okay, and finally we're going to talk about some tips for success. So here's just some general guidelines to help maintain a healthy lifestyle. As always, pay attention to your body. Like I was just sort of mentioning, you know, try and identify if you're eating because you're hungry or because you're stressed or if there's some other reason that's causing you to eat, but really try to tune in and figure out what it is that you need in that moment. Pacing yourself is a great option to not overeat. This is something that we can all be guilty of, so take your time with your food. And sit down and enjoy your meal or snack, and then, you know, sit with it, and you will know much better in 10 minutes if you're ready for more food or if you have had enough. And staying hydrated is very important, and limiting caffeine from coffee or like energy drinks is a good way to make sure that we're not taking in too many calories. Keep food just in the kitchen rather than, you know, keeping like a snack at your bedside. This might, depending on your health condition, that is a good option, but otherwise keep food in the kitchen. So what you want to avoid doing, again, the opposite side of what I was just saying, eating too quickly, we can really overdo it when we sort of mindlessly eat a big portion and don't stop to think like, okay, do I need this much food, or should I slow down and maybe take half of this portion? Avoiding eating when you're stressed, tired, in front of the TV. These are all just ways that we kind of mindlessly eat, and not the best way to maintain our weight. And if you can, avoid eating out of the bag or carton or package, because it's very easy to overdo it that way. So it's not only the ingredients that are important to take into account when you're trying to eat healthy, it's also the way that you cook them. Cooking in a way that doesn't add excess fat, baking, broiling, roasting, these are all really good options for maintaining the nutrition and the nutrition of your meal and avoiding excess calories. So using a non-stick cooking spray is a good option so that you have not too much oil in the pan. Another thing that you can do is they have these things now that you can buy that are misters that you can put your own oil in. That's what I recommend, and you can just use olive oil and you can spray your pan and cook with that rather than adding a large layer of oil. And of course, you know, picking foods that are lower in fat, lower in sugar, lower in salt. And these all tend to be less processed foods. It's hard to overdo it in these things if we're just cooking from scratch at home. So making some meals at home is a great way to avoid things that you don't want in your diet. This next tip, cooking only what you need for that meal, this can go both ways. So if it's just yourself and you just want to have one portion, sure. If you want to avoid overeating, you can cook just what you need. On the other side of that, you can cook a large amount, portion out what you're going to eat, and then refrigerate or freeze the rest. And that makes for a very easy future meal that is something that you know is healthy. Okay, fact or fiction? I'll gain about 10 pounds a year by eating an extra 100 calories a day. And this is true. Without taking anything else into account, yes, by getting an extra 100 calories a day, it really does add up over the course of a year. So just being aware of your calorie intake is really important. Okay, so eating healthy is just one aspect of a healthy lifestyle, in addition to managing your stress and also just being physically active. It's recommended for adults to get 150 minutes a week of moderate intensity exercise and 75 minutes a week of vigorous intensity. And here you can see some different ways that you can get that activity. And we'll also discuss many more options on the next slide. Here are some examples of everyday ways that you can get these different kinds of exercise. So for moderate intensity, this is when your heart rate is up, but you can still carry on a conversation. So walking briskly, doing some light yard work, playing with your kids, biking at a very comfortable pace, and very light snow shoveling. And then here are examples of vigorous intensity exercise: jogging, swimming laps, doing cross-country skiing, jumping rope, and competitive sports. These are activities that get your heart rate up to a point where you cannot carry on a conversation. Is a good rule of thumb for determining the intensity of your exercise. And if you're interested, these are in general showing you how many calories you can burn with each of these exercises that I mentioned before. So, so you can see that some of these, you can really work into your daily life. Gardening, dancing, walking. This isn't necessarily going to the gym and lifting weights. These are things that you can do just that you enjoy. Tracking exercise and movement is really useful for some people in keeping track of how many steps they have, and it can be a very useful tool for those looking to increase their exercise just during the day. And for those of our viewers who are here in San Antonio, here are a couple different organizations that do work right here in the city that offer great options. So Healthy Slim Down Showdown, that is a diabetes prevention program, really great program to be a part of. Poor Vita is a partnership of restaurants and businesses that offer healthy options for dining out. FitCitySA.com is a program. They run a few different programs, but one is exercises in public parks across the city, and you can find them online to find the schedule for that. As I mentioned before, Fitness in the Park is the program from Fit City SA that offers free exercise group programs across the city in public spaces. And like I said, no charge. Also, San Antonio offers bike rentals, and this is a great way just to get out and be active in the city. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on here in South Texas that can help promote physical activity and just general wellness. So I'm going to leave you all with a quote, and it is that wellness is a lifelong journey. It's an active process of making choices and commitments that enhance the quality of life and maximize personal potential. So the reasons that you choose to be healthy are completely, up to you, but the end goal is still the same, that we get to have the energy and opportunity to pursue a long and healthy life. And thank you all so much for joining us today. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below, and we will answer them just as soon as we can. And for more information, visit us at christassantarosa.org/heartcare.